Today, we're diving deep into a microscopic drama, a real-life war that happens on a cellular scale inside the human body. It's a story of a stealthy invasion, brilliant sabotage, and all-out biological warfare. So, let me start with a question for you. What tiny, invisible organism could possibly be smart enough to cause an illness so devastating it's been a scourge on humanity for literally centuries? Well, the culprit's name is shigella. It's a type of bacteria, part of the same big family as E. coli, actually, and it is the mastermind behind a nasty illness called bacillary dysentery, or as we usually call it, shigellosis. This is our story's main villain. To really understand how shigella wages its war, we've got to know exactly who we're dealing with. So let's get a proper profile on this cellular invader. Okay, so under a microscope, shigella looks like little rods. They're what we call gram-negative. But here's the really interesting part. They're non-modal. That means they can't swim. Unlike a lot of other bacteria, they don't have a little tail to propel themselves around. And that's a huge deal, because if you can't swim to your target, you have to get a whole lot more creative with your invasion strategy, which usually kicks off after someone ingests contaminated food or water. Now, shigella isn't just one single thing. Think of it more like a crime family with four main players. They all cause trouble, but shigella dysenteriae, that's the big boss. It's the one behind the worst epidemics because it's packing a secret weapon, a really potent poison called the Shiga toxin. We'll get to that in a minute. The other species, well, they're found all over the world, causing problems everywhere from developing nations to right here in developed countries. So, we've met the enemy. Now, let's get into its strategy, which is honestly both brilliant and absolutely brutal. How does a bacterium that can't even swim pull off such a wildly successful invasion of our gut? Its path of infection is like a perfectly planned four-step assault. It all starts with ingestion. It gets past your stomach acid, which is no small feat, and makes its way to the colon. That's step 2, invasion. It somehow tricks the cells lining your colon into just letting it in. Then comes step 3, multiplication. It turns your own cells into little bacteria factories. And that leads, of course, to the final step, destruction. It kills those host cells from the inside out, causing ulcers and the massive inflammation that defines this disease. So, how in the world does it pull off that invasion step? This is where it gets really sci-fi. Shigella has this incredible piece of machinery called a type 3 secretion system. The best way to picture it is like a microscopic molecular syringe. Seriously, the bacterium literally presses this tiny needle against one of our intestinal cells and injects its own proteins right inside. These proteins then go to work, hijacking the cell's own systems and basically forcing it to open the front door. It is an absolute masterclass in cellular sabotage. And remember S. dysenteria, the really bad one? It has an even more powerful weapon, the Shiga toxin. You know, if the molecular syringe is for breaking and entering, the Shiga toxin is for burning the whole building down. It's a total factory saboteur. Once inside ourselves, it hunts down our ribosomes. Those are the tiny machines that build all the proteins our cells need to function. The toxin just breaks a critical part of the ribosome, and poof, all protein production just grinds to a halt. And without proteins, the cell can't survive. It just dies. Okay, so you've got cells being hijacked, cells being destroyed, toxins being released. What does that actually feel like for the person whose body has just become a war zone? Let's talk about the consequences. As you can imagine, the body's response is intense. That high fever, that's your immune system screaming that something is very, very wrong. The awful cramps are from all that inflammation in the gut. And the signature bloody mucoid diarrhea, that is the direct physical evidence of the bacteria's destructive rampage. It's literally the lining of the colon being torn apart. And in the most severe infections, especially with those Shiga toxin strains, the battle can actually spill out of the gut. The toxin can get into the bloodstream and travel to the kidneys. This leads to a terrifying, life-threatening complication called hemolytic uremic syndrome, or HUS. It basically shreds the tiny blood vessels in the kidneys, causing them to shut down completely. It is the absolute worst-case scenario. So, with the body under this kind of ferocious attack, how do doctors actually confirm who the invader is? Well, this is where the real detective work begins, in the lab. It all starts with a stool sample. Under the microscope, you can see the carnage, tons of pus cells, which are basically dead immune cells, and red blood cells from the damaged colon.
To get a positive ID, they'll try to grow the bacteria on special plates, like McConkey agar, where Shigella makes these really distinct-looking colonies. And then a few biochemical tests seal the deal. They confirm its identity by what it can't do. Remember, it can't move and it can't use certain sugars. That's the smoking gun that separates it from its relatives.
All right, so the culprit has been identified. Now for the most important question. How do we fight back? How do we help the body win this war and recover from such a brutal invasion? The treatment plan has two main fronts. Number one, and this is absolutely critical, is rehydration. All that diarrhea leads to a massive loss of fluids and electrolytes, and replacing them is priority one. For severe cases, targeted antibiotics are used to help kill the bacteria. But just as important is what you should not do. And this is a big one. You should never use drugs that stop diarrhea, these so-called anti-motility drugs. It sounds like a good idea, but all you're doing is trapping the bacteria and all its toxins inside your body, which can make the illness last longer and dramatically increase the risk of deadly complications like HUS.
Of course, the best way to win this war is to make sure it never even starts. And that fight isn't one with medicine, it's one with public health. The ultimate defense against Shigella is simple stuff, really. Making sure people have clean water, proper sanitation for waste, and just understanding how incredibly important rigorous hand washing and safe food practices are.
And that really brings us to the final, bigger picture here. This is a war we fight with two main weapons, antibiotics and clean water. But Shigella, just like so many other bacteria, is getting better and better at resisting our antibiotics. At the same time, millions around the world still don't have the clean water and sanitation they need to prevent it in the first place. So it really makes you wonder, as our microscopic enemies get smarter and stronger, are we really doing enough to prepare our defenses for the next big battle?